Some time ago, the DaVinci Code novel and movie mixed fact and fiction in a masterful attempt to undermine the Christian faith. The Holy Grail was said to be the remains of Mary Magdalene, the wife of Jesus, who ended up in what is now France. An intricate web of politics, deceit, and power follows in Dan Brown's best-selling attack on the person of Christ. Today, bogus fiction meets the real truth. From the Moody Church in Chicago, this is Running to Win with Dr. Erwin Lutzer, whose clear teaching helps us make it across the finish line. Today, Erwin Lutzer continues his series on rumors about Jesus, telling us more about the Jesus of the DaVinci Code, which is based in part on non-biblical Gnostic Gospels.
The Gnostic Gospels are non-historical and even anti-historical. They contain little narrative and no sense of chronology. They make no serious pretense to being a life of Christ. See, one of the problems is that when we read a novel like the Da Vinci Code, we say, well, what about these Gnostic Gospels? We wonder what they are really like. And so because you don't get a chance to read them, of course, they've been translated, and so some of us have had the opportunity of reading them and catching a flavor. Could I take out a minute of your life to give you a flavor of the Gospel of Thomas, which is the most famous of the Gnostic Gospels? It claims to have 114 sayings of Jesus. I've chosen number 22. Jesus said to them, when you make the two into one, and when you make the inner like the outer, and the outer like the inner, and the upper like the lower, and when you make the male and female into a single one, so that the male will not be a male, nor the female be a female, and when you make the eyes in the place of an eye, and a hand in the place of a hand, a foot in the place of the foot, an image in the place of an image, then you will enter the Father's domain. Sounds just like Jesus, doesn't it? You have to read these Gospels before you get the flavor of them. And so these Gnostic Gospels, it is claimed, have some priority to the New Testament. Remember now, we're talking, for the most part, hundreds of years after the time of Christ, by people who were very anxious to put their own political philosophies and their own religious philosophies in the mouth of Jesus. They've always been called pseudo-documents. Now they've been resurrected in the Da Vinci Code. One noted New Testament scholar said regarding the Gnostic Gospels, we learn not a single verifiable new fact about the historical Jesus ministry, only a few new sayings that might possibly have been his. I'll comment on one of the Gnostic Gospels in just a moment. Claim number 3, we're told that the marriage of Jesus to Mary Magdalene is, and I'm quoting now, quote, a matter of historical fact. Really? Well, Leonardo da Vinci, he was in on the secret, and I've already mentioned that he actually painted Mary sitting next to Jesus in the portrayal of the Last Supper. What is more, there's no cup on the table because da Vinci wanted people to understand that Mary is the cup, the Holy Grail. In the novel, Langdon, one of the primary characters, says that Mary's presence in the painting represents, quote, the sacred feminine and the goddess, which of course now has been virtually eliminated in the church. Well, most art historians deny that the person sitting next to Jesus on his right is a painting of Mary. It may be an effeminate John, but that's the kind of people that Da Vinci painted. For example, in his painting of John the Baptist, it's the same thing. And what about the fact that there was no cup? Well, he was painting John's Gospel, and in Florence today there are other pictures like that that do not have the cup. So this is indeed far-fetched. But the second proof comes from the Gnostic Gospel of Philip, which says that Jesus was seen kissing Mary Magdalene on the mouth, and this disturbed the disciples. Now, even if this were true, it wouldn't prove marriage. But the question we have to ask is this. We're back to the Gnostic Gospels, the Gospel of Philip. How credible is it? You have to note that scholars date this writing to about the 3rd century, a few hundred years after the time of Jesus. Again, I have to ask, who would know these details unless they were eyewitnesses, not somebody living 200 or 300 years after the event? But this document has no credibility. It is a document that is based upon Gnostic teaching. Can I give you another quote from a Gnostic gospel just so that you get the flavor? In the Gospel of Philip we read, "The world came about through a mistake, for he who created it wanted to create it imperishable and immortal. He fell short of his desire." And in the book, Jesus is presented as one of the many emanations from God. These texts are clearly intended to articulate a pagan philosophy, not to write something credible about Jesus. You know, you can write anything you like if you're into imaginary history. And that's what we have here. Now, in about the 9th century, sometimes we think America's so old because it's 200 and some years, 225, 35. But imagine 900 years after the time of Jesus. 900 years. During that period of time, in about the 9th century, legends began to grow up about Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And so these legends are resurrected in the book, the DaVinci Code, and they're passed off as if they are plausible. Oh, you say, well, it's a novel. Yeah, it's a novel, but read the flyleaf. It says the following are facts. It gives the impression of being well researched in the realm of history. Well, many people have asked me, what about Jesus and marriage? Could he have been married? Let's think about this very carefully. Theologically, there's nothing wrong with saying that he could have been married because, catch this now, marriage is honorable and undefiled. The problem Jesus would have had is to find somebody who was as perfect as he himself was to marry. And that would be a stretch. But there is a reason why Jesus could never have married. It would have ruined the blessed, glorious picture of his future wedding. He's engaged to us, the bride of Jesus Christ, and someday we are going to be with him at what the Bible calls the marriage supper of the Lamb. And it is at that time that the marriage will be consummated in the most blessed, intimate union of fellowship imaginable. Jesus will be married, but not to a woman, but to all of us. And Mary Magdalene will be there along with